All right, shalom, shalom. First and foremost, we want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem, Rakakwadash, giving double honors to the apostles and elders of great millstone. Shalom to the hopefully elect. Shalom to all the brothers out here laboring in this truth with sincerity. Shalom to the few sisters that watch. Just coming back with a quick lesson because, at this point, trusting these people is out of the window. We don't trust them anyway. But you have the masses of the people out here, man, that believe what the media says, believe what the government says, and most of it is lies. You have misinformation and you have disinformation. And most of the stuff that these people spread pretty much is disinformation. We're gonna go into that because we know what misinformation is. Just giving out false information. Maybe it was a mistake or something like that. But disinformation is intentional. So it says disinformation is false, misleading, or inaccurate information that is deliberately created and shared with the intent to deceive. And that's what's being done, with this administration. You don't know what's true and what's false, man. It says, unlike misinformation, which may be spread by mistake, disinformation is an intentional tactic often used to manipulate public opinion, influence elections, cause harm, or gain political and financial advantage. It says key characteristics: intent to deceive. The primary differentiator is the malicious intent of the creator or distributor. Strategic manipulation, often used as a part of organized campaigns, propaganda, psychological warfare. That's what's being waged on the people right now, man. Psychological warfare, even with this Strait of Hormuz situation, which we're gonna go into that briefly. It says to polarize society or undermine trust in institutions. Modern amplification, social media, bots, and AI. It says such as deep fakes have significantly increased the speed and scale at which disinformation spreads. So with that being said, we're just going to get into this. And this was brought forth yesterday, if I'm not mistaken. Yeah, yesterday. It says U.S. military says no ships made it past blockade in the first day. So we see this is what the United States military is saying. U.S. military says no ships made it past blockade in first day. The U.S. military on Tuesday insisted no ships made it past the American blockade in the Strait of Hormuz in the first 24 hours of the effort, even as the U.S. sanctioned Chinese tanker traveled through the shipping lane to the Gulf of Oman. So, these people are lying, man. It says U.S. Central Command, the military arm that oversees American forces in the Middle East, says 6 merchant vessels complied with direction from the U.S. forces to turn around to re-enter the Iranian port of the Gulf of Oman, according to a post on social media platform X. So it says under President Trump's blockade, which began Monday and involves more than 10,000 sailors, Marines, airmen, and more than a dozen warships, the U.S. military says it blocked ships entering and departing Iranian ports and stopped vessels that paid tolls to Tehran. Okay, right here, but it says, but the rich story. A medium-range tanker traveled through the vital waterway Monday afternoon, making it through the strait on the second attempt, according to shipping data from Kepler. The ship carrying around 250,000 barrels of methanol, Ruckers reported. Yeah, and that's where we're going. Because, they said absolutely no ships made it past the blockade. So let's go right here, man. It says Strait of Hormuz traffic barely affected on first day of U.S. blockade, data shows, and this was on the 13th, the day of. It says Strait traffic remains far below pre-war levels. Industry source reports China calls U.S. blockade dangerous and irresponsible, urges de-escalation. Okay. So it says the first full day of the U.S. blockade on vessels calling Iranian ports made little difference to the Strait of Hormuz traffic on Tuesday, with at least 8 ships, including 3 Iranian-linked tankers, crossing the waterway, shipping data showed. U.S. President Donald Trump announced a blockade on Sunday after weekend peace talks with Islamabad began. The U.S. and Iranian failed. Salaki began. The U.S. and Iran failed to reach the deal. So that's keep saying began between Salaki and a little bit excited. So it says the blockade has created even further uncertainty for shippers, oil companies, war risk insurers. Traffic remains at only a fraction of the 130 plus daily crossings before the U.S. and Israel war on Iran began on February 28. Industry sources said on Tuesday. And so it says during the first 24 hours, no ships made it past the U.S. blockade. That's what they said. Okay. Read that. So, it's like conflicting information. We just read that 8 tankers made it through. But the U.S. said no tankers made it through. But, man, ultimately, we'll see in the end, man. It's all up to the Lord, man. And Lord willing, this thing escalates, out of control and brings all kind of chaos, man. Lord willing. Let's see. But it's all going to come out. This is the book of Luke chapter 8, verse 17. It says, for nothing is secret that shall not be made manifest, neither anything hid that shall not be known and come abroad, So everything is going to be brought forth to the light, man. Everything is going to be brought forth to the light. We're in the time of revealing, man. This man of sin is being revealed. The book of Genesis chapter 3, verse 1 says, the serpent was more subtle than any beast of the field. Slick, sly, cunning, crafty, So you don't know what to believe, but ultimately, Yahweh Shem Yahushai is going to reveal these people, man, in the end, and that's what we're waiting on. But, things are likely to escalate, unless Iran comply to what the United States want. But, as we see it happening now, they're not complying, man. And they'll be complete idiots, to trust this devil, man. But like the book of Ecclesiastes 12 goes into, man. Who gonna pity? Who gonna pity the charmer that get bit, man? If you're dealing with this devil, you go along with what they want, and then they turn their back on you and try to blow you off the map. You can't feel. Hey, that's your own fault, man. And that's pretty much where it's going. So, we'll see what happens, today, as it keeps going, man. But, hey, man, Babylon the Great is falling. You see restaurants closing left and right. People are not spending money like that. People don't have money allocated. Yeah, Salaki, always a call coming in. Even if you put the phone on Do Not Disturb, calls still come through. Or they might not come through, but they cut off the recording, man, which is, kind of irritating. But, yeah, I'm just going to make this quick because I got to kind of leave. But, yeah, man, Babylon the Great is falling. This man of sin is being revealed. Salakia. Man of sin is being revealed. And, yeah, man, we almost out of here, man. So, Lord willing is edifying. Salakia for all the stoppage. But, Lord willing is edifying. I want to give all praises, honor, and glory to Yahweh, Bahashem, Yahweh Shai, Bahashem Rakakwada, Shalom.